Welcome to another Verses. Welcome to another Verses. Welcome to another Verses. Welcome to another Verses of the Unity of GoatVsFish. The Unity of GoatVsFish. The Unity of GoatVsFish. The Unity of GoatVsFish. Look at that goat and fish unification. Look at... What is this? GoatVsFish? 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 GoatVsFish. It would seem that the goatfish is late. It would seem that the goatfish is late. But we knew it could not last forever. We knew goatfish could not last forever. For we know that in the beginning there was goat versus fish, the goatfish, and GoatVsFish said that there should be goat and that there should be fish. And the mighty Verses is coming, the mighty Verses is coming. Yes, we celebrated Versemiss, we celebrated Versemiss, we celebrated Versemiss. And on Versemiss, we celebrate the unity of goat and fish, the unity of goat and fish. Look at goat and fish coming together, goat and fish coming together. They form the unity of goat and fish. Goatfish unification, goatfish unification. But they say within every unification of goatfish is a little bit of Verses. And ever since goatfish, well, it was a mighty celebration, and it is a celebration, and even though you may not perceive it, we still celebrate goatfish. We still celebrate goatfish even now, and we will celebrate goatfish. We will celebrate goatfish. We will celebrate goatfish. We will... We will celebrate goatfish until the mighty Verses, until we have spelled down from the mighty Verses. Welcome to the first one in the chat. Welcome to the first one in the chat. It is Mr. Tiny Door. Mr. Tiny Door. 8132. Preceded by 4. Welcome to Goatfish. Oh yes, it's still goatfish. Oh yes, it's still goatfish. There is no good or evil morning. There is no good or evil morning, but in any Verses a morning to you. And how do you do? We still celebrate unification. Goat and fish together for your contemplation. And though it fills us with great elation, there's an end to this celebration. And the celebration is Verses. It's goat versus fish. It's goat versus fish. Mr. Tiny Door, are you goat or fish? Come, open, come through. Are you goat or fish? Are you goat or fish, Mr. Tiny Door? This is a question for you. We are beginning the counting down to the mighty Verses itself, and you, Mr. Tiny Door, you are here, you are the first one here, you are the first one here. You could be the first goat or fish of the Verses. You could be the first goat or fish of the Verses. Tell us if you are goat or fish. Tell us if you are goat or if you are fish. And goat versus fish. Do not despair, it is just goat versus fish. It is just goat versus fish. We are beginning the celebration. We are beginning the celebration with hydration. With hydration. It is a fish! It is a fish! Celebration for fish! Celebration for fish! As goat versus fish drinks of the sea of the fish, Mr. Tiny Door declares fish. Bursting through the tiniest of doors, it was a fish. It was a fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. There you are, fish. There you are, fish. The fish consumed by the verses. The fish consumed by the verses. But there's the fish. There is the fish. Celebration for the tiniest tiny Dora fish. For the tiniest tiny Dora fish. For the tiniest tiny Dora fish. How did you become such a tiny Dora fish? And seeing as you are a fish that is such a tiny door, is it not possible that as the fish is coming through the tiniest of doors that you meet obstruction by goat, Has a goat ever tried to obstruct your tiniest of doors, fish? We wish to know, we wish to know. But now, the verses. We must make the verses anew, we must make the verses anew. Goat versus fish, making the verses anew now, making the verses anew now. Yes. Yes, to bring in the mighty verses, we must have a mighty verses of goat and fish. And now we have a fish, and now we have a Mr. Tiny Door fish. Yes, let it begin, let it begin. Let it begin, let a new verses begin. And this shall be a verses. Oh, we know this will not end in goatfish. We know this will not end in goatfish. We know this will end in goat versus fish. Because we are counting down to the mighty verses, to the mighty verses, to the mightiest of all verses, and that verses is goat versus fish. Yes. Celebration. Celebration. Well, here we are. Here we are ready for new verses, and we have the tiniest of doors, being the first fish of the verses, opening verses goes to the tiny door fish, Here you are, here you come, Mr. Tiny Door, there it is, there's fish, and it is Mr. Tiny Door. Yes, it is so tiny, it is such a tiny verses, but there are going to be many goat and fish to come, and we will make it written, we shall make it written. If you are watching Goat versus Fish, tell us if you are goat or fish in the chat. Inventive Harvest! Celebration for Inventive Harvest! Celebration for Inventive Harvest! Celebration for the Inventive Harvest! Inventive Harvest is here! Celebration! Inventive Harvest, are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? You may say, oh, goat versus fish, we answered that question last verses. It is always the verses to ask you. If you are goat or fish, and in any verses, the mighty verses is coming. We shall count down. GoatVsFish, and we all say mighty verses, and may old offenses be forgot, and goat versus fish. Celebration, and Inventive Harvest says, I am goatfish, individuality must be wiped out. Oh, goat versus fish, It is on the fence. It says individuality must be wiped out, but then how can you even be to be wiping out an individuality unless a goat and a fish come together to form the unity of the goatfish? We wonder if when you are approached by a fish, if you would say that you are a goat in order to form the unity of the goatfish, or if you are approached by a goat, would you say that you are fish in order to form the unity of goat and fish? We do not know, but it is very ponderous how those who say individuality must be wiped out. Yes, they say, I am but one. I stand alone to say that we must be wiping out individuality. I stand alone as a goatfish, even though there are goat and there are fish. I stand alone, and I, as an individual saying that there shall be no individuality, stand alone and say that I am goatfish without needing to be a goat and a fish coming together, a goat and a fish coming together to form the unity of the goatfish. Interesting verses. Inventive Harvest. Inventive harvest on the fence. Inventive harvest on the fence. We have a fence sitter. We have a fence sitter. But do not despair. Even the fence sitter is welcome. Even the fence sitter is welcome at the mighty verses. Is welcome at the mighty verses. In the mean verses. In the mean verses. We have a goat for the fish. We have a goat or a fish. We have Mukulmira the goat. We have Mukulmira the goat. Celebration. Celebration for goat. Mukulmira. It's becoming clearer. It's becoming clearer. It's becoming clearer to GoatVsFish. You keep coming by the verses, and we welcome you here. We welcome you here whenever a goat called Mukulmira is near. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Oh, Fence-bot, you are on the fence, aren't you? I am on the fence. Oh, Fence-bot. Oh, Fence-bot, we were just celebrating a goat and you had to come in and just declare out of nowhere, action! I am on the fence. I am on the fence. Well, Fence-bot, then it is to the fence with you. Then it is to the fence with you. To the fence with you, Fence-bot! We were hoping you would choose GoatVsFish for the mighty verses, but to the fence with you, to the fence with you. Inventive harvest was on the fence. Mukulmira is goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration, celebration. We have a goat. We have a fish. We wonder. Mukulmira the goat. Mukulmira the goat. We are curious. We are curious. We have Mukulmira the goat. We have Mr. Tiny Door for the fish. We wonder, Mukulmira the goat, Mr. Tiny Door the fish, are you going to come together to verses on the mighty verses? We are looking for goat and fish to look at one another and say, we shall have a verses, we shall have a verses. Mr. Tiny Door versus Mukulmira, go, 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 go! We must practice for the mighty verses, we must practice for the mighty verses. Yes, an inventive harvest. You can sit up there on your fence and tell them, no, no, don't verses, no, come together, form the unity of goat and fish. You may do whatever you wish. That is what they do. That is what they do from there on the fence. They would look at the goat, they would look at the fish, and they would say, you are not a goat, you are not a fish, you are not a goat, you are not a fish. No, no, we banish goat and fish, we banish goat and fish, says this fence sitter. It says, unification means no goat and fish, only GoatVsFish. And yet you can clearly see that there is goat and fish within GoatVsFish. You can clearly see there is goat and fish within GoatVsFish. It says goat and it says fish. That is why we celebrate the GoatVsFish. That is why we celebrate the GoatVsFish. For it is goat and fish. Look at the verses. Oh, it is GoatVsFish. Oh, it is GoatVsFish. Yes, GoatVsFish. It is not your verses yet, GoatVsFish. GoatVsFish is trying to impinge upon GoatVsFish. GoatVsFish is trying to impinge upon GoatVsFish. We are trying to celebrate GoatVsFish, even as we prepare for the mighty verses. And there is GoatVsFish, and there is GoatVsFish. Celebration for GoatVsFish, celebration for GoatVsFish. Goat is the best. Mukulmira the goat, opening verses with. Goat is the best. Mr. Tiny Door for the fish. Goat is the best for 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 fish, or for fish, goat is the best. Is goat the best for fish? Is goat the best for fish? Well, it is GoatVsFish. Well, it is GoatVsFish. It is GoatVsFish. And they say, sir, they call forgotten virtue a sir. They call forgotten virtue a sir. Oh, look, it is forgotten virtue. Oh, look, it is forgotten virtue. Hello, forgotten virtue. Hello, forgotten virtue. Fine verses to you. Fine verses to you. Are you goat or are you fish? Forgotten virtue for the mighty verses. Are you goat or are you fish? The mighty verses is coming. We still celebrate goat and fish unification, but the mighty verses is coming. We must know how much of a mighty verses it is going to be. How much of a mighty verses it is going to be. We must know. We must know GoatVsFish. We must know. And while forgotten virtue was pondering if it was goat or fish, it was Mark Hills, the Facebook goat. Mark Hills, the Facebook goat, coming out from the hills. Coming from the hills. Coming from the hills. It was goat. Coming from the hills. It was goat. Celebration for Mark Hills, the goat. Goat. We shall put you right here. We shall put you right here among the goat. Right here among the goat. Celebration for goat. It is the second goat. It is the second goat. We are just beginning the verses. We are just beginning to count the verses to see how mighty the mighty verses shall be. To see how mighty verses the mighty verses shall be. Celebration for goat. Let us tell us the verses of Mark Hills the goat. Fish better swim for the hills. Fish better swim for the hills. They'd better check their gills. Better check their gills. But on the hills, on the hills, on the hills is Mark Gills the goat. Mark Gills on the Book of Faces is spreading goat versus fish to so many places, to the reception of goat and fish faces that are smiling with elation. Elations is? Why not? Why not for the celebration of the mighty goatfish and the mighty verses? Mark Hills for goat, celebration for goat, celebration for goat, celebration for goat. How are you preparing for the mighty verses? We want to know now. We want to know from all of you, how are you preparing to celebrate the coming of the mighty verses? How are you preparing to celebrate the coming of the mighty verses? How are you preparing to celebrate the coming of the mighty verses? That is the question. And forgotten virtue, with the declaration, with the declaration! I have my fence up today. Look at what you have become. Look at what you have become. Forgotten virtue, it was on the fence for so many verses, and then it became goat, ready to versus the fish, And then it sat on the fence, and then it sits on the fence for the mighty verses, oh no! We should have known that forgotten virtue. We shall go to forgotten virtue soon, and we shall see its fenciness, for it is also, even though we anticipate the mighty verses, it is also Goat versus Fish Thursdays. Goat versus Fish Thursdays. Can you believe? Goat versus Fish can believe it. That Goat versus Fish Thursday was both for Versmiss Eve and for the eve of the mighty verses. That is the power of Goat versus Fish. That is the power of Goat versus Fish. On the fence. Forgotten's virtue. On the fence. Oh no, the fence. Oh, it is getting longer. It is getting stronger. But then. Little bit of the Chihuahua and Kenneth Triplet says, wow, what a long verses. I am celebrating now, eating a bolognish sandwich, watching Goat versus Fish. Celebration for Goat versus Fish. But we want to know little bit the Chihuahua and Kenneth Triplet. Are you goat or are you fish? The mighty verses is coming. We need more goat and fish. Imagine if there were more fence sitters at the mighty verses than goat or fish. Oh, woe would be the goatfish. But thankfully, here comes another fence sitter. But come, welcome to the verses. It is Albamani. Everyone, give your verses to Albamani the fence sitter. Albamani the fence sitter. If you please remember the Comedy Store Los Angeles. If you please remember the Comedy Store of Los Angeles. And Albamani's. And Albamani's with the Goat versus Fish podcast. It it lasted, it lasted, it lasted, it last. Celebration for Albamani! It has been here long verses with Goat versus Fish. And then Fenspot said, Miss Lenity, what do you verse? Who do you verses? Ooh, it is asking you who you verses. It is asking who you verses. But let us see. Albamani on the fence. And so Albamani on the fence. Oh no. It is the fence sitter again. And then but then little bit the chihuahua, and Kenneth Triplett said, I am a goat and my chihuahua is a fish. Celebration for goat, 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 and celebration for your chihuahua that is a fish, for your chihuahua that is a fish. Yes, you claim to be, there's a goat with you and there is a fish. Well, we can have the goat for this mighty verses. You can be the goat, and then you can have your chihuahua be a fish. You can have your chihuahua be a fish, and you can verses. We hope that you verses on the mighty verses. Nerdy Goose YT, I had no idea you were live on the Twitch. Oh yes, Goat vs. Fish is now live on the Twitch. Goat vs. Fish Thursday, every 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That is, they say, oh, why don't you make a schedule, Goat vs. Fish, the Goat Fish? Why don't you make a schedule for the Twitch? Well, Goat vs. Fish schedule has always been Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That has always been the verses, and it shall continue to be the verses. Nerdy Goose YT, you can count it upon your Goat and Fish that Goat vs. Fish will be live on the Twitch and the YouTube, and now the Book of Faces every 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Thursverses. That is true. Twitch was dog pooping on the notifications. Oh no, fence sitting on the notification, Well, you know, that is just how it be with the Twitch. It is, there is always some fenciness. Whenever Goat versus Fish is not speaking directly to you, there is some fenciness. But you can see that it is Goat Fish, and you can see that the verses is trying to infringe upon the Goat Fish, trying to make it Goat versus Fish, even though it is clearly Goat Fish. My beta fish is fish. Ooh, you have a fish, Mr. Tiny Door. Your beta fish is fish. Celebration for fish. Yes, we add a fish. Yes, you may say, oh, Goat versus Fish. You do not always add goat and fish so easily as this. But Goat versus this is a mighty versus. This is going to be the mightiest mighty versus that ever versus. And we want all the goat and fish. Nerdy Goose YT. Yes, there's the beta fish. Nerdy Goose YT. Are you goat? Or are you fish? Are you goat or fish? We want to know, Nerdy Goose YT. It is always the verses for a declaration. It matters not how many declarations you made before. You must declare if you are goat or fish. Let us bring in the new verses. And the new verses. Farly and widely the ringing of the goatfish went out. But whereas once it was, now the ringing of the goatfish became ever fainter as Goat versus Fish was coming, It is a celebration, even as we cling to Goatfish unification. We know it will be a celebration when the Goat versus Fish comes, but let us have unity of Goat and Fish just a little longer, please. Goatfish, goat and fish, fish and goat, goat of the land and the fish of the sea, goat and fish in unity of goatfish, goatfish, goat are goat, fish are fish, fish are fish, goat are goat, goat have horns and fish have fins. In the verses can everyone win if it's goat versus goat and fish and goat versus fish. It is starting to become goat versus fish, the goat fish. It is starting to become goat versus fish, the goat fish. Harry Bullsack, meh, with the goat, meh, with the goat. Meh. Celebration for Harry Bullsack the goat. Celebration for Harry Bullsack the goat. Harry Bullsack the goat. Harry Bullsack the goat. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. Goat Fish. Welcome to Goat Fish. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. The celebration continues from the mighty verses from verse miss to the mighty verses of Goat versus Fish. It is as simple as Goat versus Fish. It is simple as celebrating the Goat Fish on verse miss to then come to the mighty verses. That is Goat versus Fish, the Goat Fish. I'm Goat versus Fish, the Goat Fish. It is clearly Goat versus Fish. You can explain it to anyone. You can say, oh, it is Goat Fish, it is Goat versus Fish, it is Goat and Fish, it is Goat and Fish, it is Goat and Fish, it is Goat versus Fish. The unity of Goat Fish. Harry Bullsack the goat. Harry Bullsack the goat. Do you have a fish? Harry Bullsack the goat. Do you have a fish to verses for the mighty verses? That is a question. That is a question. But here's your verses, Harry Bullsack. Here's your goat. The goat is note. The goat is note. The goat is note. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. You can buy shirts and more at GoatVsFish.com/store. Thank you, FenceBot. Thank you, FenceBot. Now, please choose goat or fish. Please choose goat or fish. Fence-sitters can. Fence-sitters can what? Fence-sitters can choose goat or fish. Fence-sitters can choose goat or fish. Yes, fence-sitters can't lose. Fence-sitters can't. What can you do? What can't you do? What can you do? What can't you do? Ooh, Goat versus Fish. The fence-sitter. Oh, Goat versus Fish. Just even trying to, as soon as you begin speaking your fenciness, just becoming incomprehensible to Goat versus Fish. Incomprehensible to Goat versus Fish. But we shall see what it says soon. We shall see what it says soon, because soon we shall go to Forgotten Virtue, and then we shall go to Julia, Mr. Humdinger. Ooh, you call Goat versus Fish. You call Goat versus Fish. You say, hello, good sirs. You must mean that for Forgotten Virtue, because Goat versus Fish is neither good nor evil, and because there is no good or evil, and you can call me sir if you wish, but we just say that you call us Goat versus Fish. Celebration for Harry Bullsack. Welcome to the pre-Goat Fish for the mighty verses. Goat Fish. FY Milky celebration, FY Milky celebration, FY Milky celebration. Happy new verses. Oh, it is not the new verses yet. Oh, it is not the new verses yet. We are counting down. We are counting down. We are counting down to the new verses. We are counting down to the new verses. Should older verses be forgot and never black nor white? Yes, yes. Goat versus Fish. It will be a celebration. It will be a celebration. We shall hail in the coming of the verses as the verses falls before our very selves, and not yet Goat versus Fish, not yet Goat versus Fish. We are still going to celebrate Goat and Fish unification for another verses, but we will celebrate Goat versus Fish. We will celebrate Goat versus Fish. Oh, and here they come, flipped. Oh, Goat versus Fish. Oh, that is what you say. That is what you say, flipped. You say it is flipped in a horizontal verses, but Goat versus Fish checked this verses last verses, and they said that it was not such a verses. They said it was not such a verses. Goat versus Fish. Are you to tell Goat versus Fish, the Goat Fish, that this is mighty Goat versus Fish again? Goat versus Fish again. We tested this verses just last verses. Goat versus Fish. The verses is reversed. The verses is reversed again. Well, that will just have to be the verses for now. Goat versus Fish, Goat versus Fish. The Goat Fish will test the verses. You say, oh, it is all in reverse. It is all in reverse. It is all in reverse. Well, perhaps that is because it is Goat Fish. Perhaps that is because it is Goat Fish. Have you ever considered this? Have you ever considered this? Yes, you do not know why. FY Milky, are you Goat or Fish? Before we throw to Forgotten Virtue, we need to know, are you Goat or are you Fish? It's not the radio. It's not the radio. It's Goat Fish. It's Goat Fish. This is Fish versus Goat. This is Fish versus Goat. It's not the radio. Welcome to Goat versus Fish, the Goat Fish. We want to know if you're a goat or a fish. You want to know if it's goat or fish. Oh, it's Fish. FY Milky, the Milky Fish. It is FY Milky, the Milky Fish. The Milky Fish. Celebration for the Milky Fish, for the Milky Fish. Yes. You can grow to be big and strong if you drink your fish milk every verses. Yes, you can have a fish stash. You can have a fish stash. Celebration. GVF directed by Nolan. Oh god, you do not even know how inception the verses of GoatVsFish can get now. You do not even know. Nerdy Goose is also fish. It's not the radio, it's goat time. Oh, we have goat and fish. Yes, let us make the verses now. The declaration. Nerdy Goose YT. Fish. Celebration for fish. Yes, you can reverse the verses. Perhaps this shall help you. Perhaps will this help you to reverse the verses? Is it more comprehensible to you now, the goat and the fish? And then we have it's not the radio for the goat. The fifth goat of the verses, the fifth goat of the verses. And we have FY Milky the fish. FY Milky the fish is always fish. Celebration for fish. Yes, there is the verses. We reverse the verses just for you. Harry Bolsick with the reverse verses, with the reverse goat, with the reverse fish, with the reverse verses. Now that is the verses. Look at it. Look at the reverse verses. Look at the reversed verses. But if you are seeing the verses in reverse, then you should see that verses reversed as verses, yes? Ooh, it's becoming quite GoatVsFish. Gearbox declaring fish! Gearbox has declared fish! It was on the fence for so many verses, but Gearbox declares fish. Celebration for Gearbox the fish. Now, there are some verses you need to know. Fencebot, we are calling upon you now, Fencebot. We call upon Fencebot. Fencebot, we have a verses for you. What is your verses? Shout out, forgotten virtue. Do you comply, Fencebot? Do you comply? Action, follow forgotten virtue at location twitch.tv/forgotten virtue. Do not sit on the fence. Currently playing, just chatting. Ooh, that sounds fun. GoatVsFish should go there, and we should say, forgotten virtue, it is the mighty verses. Are you goat or are you fish? We should all ask it. If you are goat or fish. Wow, mom! Wow, mom! You just joined the GoatVsFish Patreon. Wow, mom! You really accept GoatVsFish, don't you, mom? Wow, mom! From the great beyond, signed up for the GoatVsFish Patreon. It is a mighty verses. Wow, mom, wow. Celebration for wow, mom for the Patreon. Celebration for wow, mom, wow. GoatVsFish on the Patreon with wow, mom, wow. Mom loves you, oh, and the love comes back to you from the GoatVsFish. Oh, it is the unification of goat and fish. But now we need to know. GoatVsFish. You listen. You also need to shouting out. Julian, Mr. Humdinger. GoatVsFish. Yes, we must also shouting out Julian Mr. Humdinger because it is part of GoatVsFish Thursday as well. And we also need to shouting out. Just because it is near. We need to shout out 34 Arb0ox. Yes, why not? We are just shouting out all the verses. If you want to be shouted out by GoatVsFish, just say GoatVsFish. Shout me out, shout out the verses. Well, mom, fish! Yes, goat. Did you know that there are two patrons, unless there is yet another? There's two patrons. There's two patrons now on the GoatVsFish Patreon, and they are both fish! Two fish patronize GoatVsFish. Two fish patronize GoatVsFish. Let us have a look at the verses. Shout out the verses. We shout you out. The verses is listening. And it will be GoatVsFish. We know it will be GoatVsFish. Welcome to fish. Best team. Declaration of fish. Let us see GoatVsFish. Patreon.com/GoatVsFish. As we are getting ready to go to Forgotten Virtue, we want you to tell everyone about GoatVsFish on the Twitch, because from 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time to 1 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, we will have a celebration, a continuous celebration of GoatVsFish. A continuous celebration of GoatVsFish until it is the mighty verses, and then we shall bring in the mighty verses, and we shall have the mightiest verses of GoatVsFish. Come, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Come and celebrate with GoatVsFish. Come and celebrate with GoatVsFish or GoatVsFish until it becomes GoatVsFish. 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Yes, come join GoatVsFish. Join the GoatVsFish. Join the GoatVsFish. And let us see here. Yes, we shall share a screen, and then we shall show you the power of GoatVsFish. We shall show you the power of GoatVsFish. And look, there it is. Two patrons celebration. GoatVsFish is live on the Twitch. And it is Julian Mr. Humdinger. It's not, I have hosted your verses. It's not the radio has hosted the verses. It's not the radio, but is it GoatVsFish? It's not the radio, but is it GoatVsFish? Ooh, it's not the radio. It's not the radio. We shall shout you out. Shout out. It's not the radio. Yes, it invites GoatVsFish to be on the verses, and perhaps we shall join the verses. One verses, you never know. Just keep trying to find GoatVsFish. You should be able to find GoatVsFish. It's not the radio goat. It's not the radio goat. It's not the radio goat. Fensbot, thank you, Julian Mr. Humdinger for 5 bits. Julian Mr. Humdinger, are you goat or fish this verses? Are you goat or fish this verses? We need to know, before we throw to Forgotten Virtue, we need to know if you are goat or fish, Julian Mr. Humdinger, as it's not the radio. It's not the radio. The caveman, the cave goat man, the caveman goat. It is a goat, but we need to know, Julian Mr. Humdinger, are you goat or are you fish this verses? Perhaps you are going to declare if you are goat or fish on your own stream of verses coming up on GoatVsFish Thursday. Perhaps that is what you do. But Julian Mr. Humdinger cheered for fish. 1s, 2s, 3s, 4, 5s. It already declared for fish. 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s for fish. Now, Julian Mr. Humdinger, now you are fish. Julian Mr. Humdinger, this verse is... We have a verses for you, Julian Mr. Humdinger. And we did shout you out not a verses ago, but Julian Mr. Humdinger, listen to GoatVsFish. Forgotten Virtue is back on the fence. We know. Forgotten Virtue, it's back on the fence. With the mighty verses coming, Forgotten Virtue is back on the fence. Look at Forgotten's Virtue. It forgot its virtue sitting on the fence. It forgot its virtue sitting on the fence. Wow, sitting on the fence. That is what happened. Oh, how has the GoatVsFish failed Forgotten's Virtue? Why have you abandoned us, Forgotten Virtue? Abandoned the GoatVsFish for the fence! Oh no. Whatever shall we do? Will it be goat or fish? By GoatVsFish? We do not know. Reverse verses. Thank you for joining GoatVsFish. On the Book of Faces, on the Twitch, on the YouTube. But now we must go to a place called Forgotten Virtue. Why? We know you are here for GoatVsFish. We know you are here for GoatVsFish. But GoatVsFish must remain true to its promises, and we promise that on GoatVsFish Thursday, we go to welcome Forgotten Virtue. So go to Forgotten Virtue, and say to Forgotten Virtue, are you goat or fish? Forgotten Virtue? Are you a goat or are you a fish? The GoatVsFish will come back at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And until 1 a.m. we shall bring in the mighty verses. Tell them all. Shout it out on the Book of Faces, on the Instagram, on the Twitterver, and all social media. Say, GoatVsFish shall be here. It shall be GoatVsFish. Join the mighty verses. Yes, and also, GoatVsFish, because we have done this in preparation. If you are on Discord, join the Discord of GoatVsFish. Celebration from Venspot! Celebration from Venspot! Yes, join the Discord of GoatVsFish if you have not already joined that Discord of GoatVsFish, where even after the streams, after the living streams of GoatVsFish, the versus continues. Share your memes of goat and fish. Share your memes of GoatVsFish. Share your memes of the fence and chat with fellow goat and fish, all on the Discord of GoatVsFish. And for the 5 bits, Julia Mr. Humdinger with the 5 bits, with the 5 bits for the fish. There it is. There it is. You can see the verses beginning. You can see the verses beginning. Look there. 5 bits. 5 bits for fish. No bits for goat. There are more fish than goat. When the mighty verses comes, and it is no longer goat fish, it looks like fish. It looks like fish may be having an edge. It looks like it may be edge to fish. Maybe edge fish. Maybe edge fish. Thank you for joining GoatVsFish, the unity of GoatVsFish. Thank you for joining the unity of goat and fish. And stop trying to edge in on my verses. GoatVsFish. And thank you, Wow Mom, for becoming Patreon. And Harry Bolsek for the goats. Saying we are not going to let you take the mighty verses. Who is going to take the mighty verses? Who is going to triumph in the mighty verses? The goat or the fish? This is the mightiest verses of the new verses. This is the first verses of the new verses, the mighty verses. We want to know who triumphs, the goat or the fish. Harry Bolsek is saying it might be goat. It might be goat with 6 bits from Harry Bolsek for goat. It is just beginning. The verses is just beginning. But now, and you know, GoatVsFish will return 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Discord? Yes. 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 You question it? Yes. Discord. You can find their GoatVsFish. But we believe you're already there. Celebration! Yes, we shall see you. Now we are going to raid Forgotten's virtue. We are going to raid the most forgotten of all virtues. It is forgotten if it is goat or fish. When you get into the chat of Forgotten Virtue, we want you to say, are you goat or are you fish? And then remember, Julia Mr. Humdinger shall be here soon. Julian Mr. Humdinger, part of GoatVsFish. There's a part of GoatVsFish. There's a part of your balanced verses. Unrecognized command. Oh, Fenspot. Recognize GoatVsFish. Julian Mr. Humdinger. Recognize GoatVsFish. Harry Bolsek with the forgotten cool guy. But now let us raid. Raid. GoatVsFish. That is GoatVsFish. Raid Forgotten Virtue. When we raid Forgotten Virtue, we want to see you all asking it. Are you goat or fish? Ask it if it is goat or fish. Say merry verses. Say mighty verses. Say mighty goatfish. Say mighty verses to you. But we raid Forgotten Virtue, and be sure to ask it if it is goat or if it is fish. Here comes the verses. The raid is getting ready. We are getting ready to raid Forgotten Virtue. We shall see you for the celebration. Follow GoatVsFish in all places, says Fenspot.